And this particular video is about the book, also called Critical Thinking, by Nicole Price and Simon Bradley.
Oh, cool.
And what's really interesting is the hosts of the video are Nicole Price and Simon Bradley themselves.
So they're summarizing their own book?
Exactly.
That's pretty meta.
I know, right? But it's a really fascinating way to see how they break down these big ideas for a broader audience.
And it's in Hindi, did you say?
Yeah, Hindi.
So we're going to be getting like a global perspective on critical thinking.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes this deep dive so exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll be translating and unpacking the key insights from this video, diving into how critical thinking is defined, this historical journey, and why it matters so much today.
Definitely. It's such a crucial skill.
Yeah. I think our goal is to equip our listeners with a deeper understanding of what critical thinking really is.
At first.
And more importantly, how they can actually use it in their own lives.
Practical application. That's what we're all about.
Right. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the video. They kick things off by defining critical thinking.
Okay.
It's about examining information very carefully, testing its validity, making sure it holds up, and then using that understanding to make good decisions.
It's about not just taking things at face value, right?
Exactly. Challenging assumptions.
But how often do we just accept a news headline without really digging deeper?
Oh, all the time. It's easy to do.
Critical thinking pushes us to go beyond the surface.
Exactly. So they outline these 6 steps for critical thinking.
Okay.
First, you've got to identify the main ideas.
Yep.
Then you gather all the information that's relevant.
Make sure you're well informed.
Then you got to find solid evidence to back up those ideas.
Building a strong foundation.
Then you build your own argument, right? See if you can put those pieces together.
Right. See if it all makes sense.
And then you got to identify any gaps.
Where the logic might be weak.
Flaws in the reasoning.
Exactly.
And finally, you propose solutions.
Okay, so it's a very structured approach.
It is. It's a process, right? So the video really highlights that critical thinking is all about deeply understanding facts, thinking logically.
Analyzing information and building solid arguments.
And they make a great point. It's so crucial in our world today because we're just bombarded with information all the time.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah. So we need critical thinking to help us sift through it all.
To figure out what's actually true and what's not.
Separate fact from fiction.
And to not be swayed by, emotional appeals or misinformation.
Exactly. And it improves communication too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You can't explain something clearly to someone else unless you truly understand it yourself.
It forces you to really think things through.
And they say it even boosts creativity.
Really?
Yeah, because you're constantly questioning assumptions.
Looking at things from different angles.
Fresh perspectives.
So in a work setting, it can help you come up with more innovative ideas.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The video ties critical thinking to democracy.
Oh, how so?
They emphasize its role in informed decision-making, both for citizens and for our leaders.
Right, like making sure people are educated and engaged.
They even humorously point out, and this is a quote, politicians often prioritize their own interests over public good.
Well, yeah, that's not always the case.
Of course not.
But it is a reminder that critical thinking is important.
To hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. Make sure they're serving the people.
Exactly. So let's take a step back in time now.
Okay.
And explore the history of critical thinking. So the video explains that it's not a new concept, obviously.
Right.
But it was mainly practiced by, philosophers.
Scholars.
And particularly Socrates.
Oh, the OG.
He believed deep discussions were seriously lacking in society.
So there was a lot of confusion and baseless beliefs floating around.
Exactly. So Socrates really challenged that status quo, encouraging people to question everything.
Don't just blindly trust authority.
And that includes the government, right?
Yeah, words and actions don't always match up.
And he's famous for saying, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Wow.
It's all about constantly questioning, self-reflection.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. And he developed the Socratic method, right? Using targeted questions to expose flaws in reasoning.
Ah, to get people thinking critically.
And of course, Socrates had some pretty brilliant students.
Like Plato and Aristotle.
Exactly.
Yeah, they really carried the torch.
Plato emphasized logical thinking.
Not just accepting appearances.
And Aristotle advocated for a very structured method to analyze our thoughts and ideas.
So they were really building on Socrates' ideas.
They were. So then the video jumps ahead to the Middle Ages, focusing on Thomas Aquinas, who believe that faith was acceptable, of course, but it should be rooted in logic.
Not just blind belief.
Right. To illustrate this, they actually use an example from Indian culture, the Hindu tradition of worshiping the peepal tree.
Interesting. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it might seem illogical on the surface.
Why would you worship a tree?
But the reasoning behind it is fascinating.
What is it?
Peepal trees are unique.
Okay.
They release oxygen at night, unlike most trees that release carbon dioxide.
Ah, I see.
So worshiping them is like a way to protect these valuable oxygen-producing trees.
Oh, so there's a practical reason behind it.
Exactly. And this ties back to critical thinking, right? Questioning assumptions, looking for the underlying reasons.
So forming judgments.
And then comes Francis Bacon, who really championed observation and scientific methods.
To test old beliefs?
Right. He urged people to seek empirical evidence, really put those beliefs to the test.
So he was a big proponent of the scientific method.
Absolutely.
It all makes sense.
So we've seen how critical thinking has evolved through history. But how do we actually use it, right?
Right, the practical side of things.
The video introduces two key methods: inductive and deductive reasoning.
Oh, I've heard of those. But I could use a refresher.
Me too. So inductive reasoning is forming beliefs based on repeated observations.
Like the sun rises in the east every day, so it must always rise in the east.
But that belief only holds true until new evidence comes along, right?
Yeah, it's based on patterns, but those patterns can change.
Right. So then there's deductive reasoning, which is considered more reliable.
Okay.
You start with a general principle and apply it to a specific case.
So like, all humans are mortal, therefore our friend Bob is also mortal.
Bit morbid, but logically sound.
It is.
The video stresses that both inductive and deductive reasoning are super important for analyzing situations, making those well-informed decisions.
It's like having different tools for different jobs.
Exactly.
It's about having that toolkit,
Right.
right? Being able to use different methods.
Exactly. Now, I think a lot of people might be thinking, okay, this is all well and good, but why does it actually matter?
Yeah, the so what question.
Right. The video actually addresses this, exploring why critical thinking matters so much in our everyday lives.
It's not just some abstract philosophical concept, right?
I know. It has real-world implications.
It helps us make better decisions, for one thing.
Exactly.
Solve problems more effectively.
And just generally think more clearly.
It's like a mental upgrade.
It is. Imagine you're faced with a big decision, like,
Whether to take a new job or not.
right? Or maybe invest in something.
Critical thinking gives you the tools to really weigh the pros and cons.
To evaluate all the information.
Make a choice that aligns with your values and goals.
It can also help you navigate that constant stream of information we were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah, figuring out what sources are credible.
Right. Who to trust.
Avoiding those echo chambers.
It's like having a built-in BS detector.
I love that. A BS detector.
So the video also makes this interesting point about problem solving.
Okay.
They say that instead of just reacting to a problem, critical thinking encourages us to really analyze it.
Break it down.
Ask the right questions.
And come up with creative solutions.
They use this example of choosing whether or not to study engineering.
Okay. Yeah.
You might hear people saying, oh, engineering is a great field.
Lots of job opportunity.
But then others might highlight the challenges, the demanding workload.
The competition.
So critical thinking helps you weigh all that information.
Right. Make an informed decision.
And then they talk about this distinction between reading and thinking.
Okay. Interesting.
They say reading involves, understanding the words, the meanings, taking in the information.
Right. Kind of passive absorption.
But thinking goes a step further.
It's active.
You reflect on what you've read, you question it, you draw your own conclusions.
Ah, so it's not just about taking in information. It's about processing it.
They use this example of carrots and eyesight. We've all heard that carrots are good for our eyes.
Right. But a critical thinker wouldn't just accept that blindly.
Exactly. They'd ask why, how.
What's the evidence?
And they do some research, right?
Right. And find out that carrots are high in beta-carotene, which our bodies convert to vitamin A.
And vitamin A is essential for good vision, especially in low light.
So there's the connection.
So the next time someone says carrots are good for your eyes, you can actually explain why.
Instead of just parroting what you've heard.
It's about having that deeper understanding.
So both reading and thinking are important.
Absolutely. But thinking takes us to that next level.
Like reading gives you the ingredients and thinking is how you make a meal.
I like that analogy. Okay, so let's talk about how critical thinking can actually help us solve real-world problems.
Let's get practical.
Right. The video walks us through a specific example.
Okay.
Let's say you're a manager and sales for one of your products have suddenly plummeted.
Uh-oh, that's never good.
Not good at all.
So what do you do?
Well, the first step is to clearly identify the problem.
Don't bury your head in the sand.
Acknowledge that there's an issue. Face it head on.
Right. But then you have to figure out why sales are declining.
Analyze the problem. Is it the product itself?
Has the market changed?
Is the competition doing something better?
So you have to gather data, right?
Look at customer feedback, industry trends.
Be a detective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once you understand the problem, then you brainstorm solutions.
Okay, so maybe you need to improve the product.
Right. Or just your pricing.
Maybe launch a new marketing campaign.
But then you have to evaluate those solutions.
Make sure they're actually addressing the root cause.
Right. A marketing campaign won't help if the product itself is flawed.
Good point.
So you choose the solution that makes the most sense, put it into action, and then what?
You check the results, right?
Exactly. Did it work?
Did sales improve?
If not, you might need to tweak your approach.
Or try a different solution.
It's a process, an ongoing thing.
So it's not just about thinking, it's about doing.
Taking action. Okay, now for the fun part. How do we actually improve our critical thinking skills?
Yeah, give us the tips.
The video has some great ones. First, they say pay attention to how you make decisions.
Be more mindful.
Reflect on your thought process.
What factors are influencing your choices?
Are you being logical?
Or are your emotions taking over?
It's about self-awareness, understanding your own patterns.
Right, so you can make more conscious, deliberate decisions.
They also emphasize listening to others.
Even when you disagree with them.
Especially when you disagree with them.
It's tough, but important.
It is. It's about trying to understand their perspective.
See things from their point of view.
Challenge your own assumption.
Because we don't always have all the answers.
And then, of course, there's questioning your own beliefs.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Why do you believe what you believe?
Is there evidence to support it?
Or have you just always accepted it without really thinking about it?
It's like taking inventory of your belief system.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to let go of things that no longer serve you.
That can be hard, though.
It can, but it's necessary for growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about being open to new information, new possibilities.
It's like that saying, the mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open.
Exactly. Now, the video also emphasizes that critical thinking isn't just about, analyzing information in a vacuum.
Right. It's not just a mental exercise.
It's about actually applying it.
Making it useful in the real world.
So they make the point that a true critical thinker doesn't just, sit around contemplating ideas.
They actually do something with that knowledge.
Right. They take action.
Like if you're facing a problem at work, critical thinking can help you come up with a solution.
And a plan to implement that solution.
It's about turning thought into action.
It is. Yeah. And it made me think about how they talked about critical thinking in a democracy.
Right, how it's essential for informed citizenry.
Yeah, and they even kind of jokingly pointed out that, politicians don't always have our best interests at heart.
Well, that's true of any profession, I guess.
True, but it's a good reminder that we need to think critically about the information we're getting.
Especially from people in positions of power.
Exactly. Question their motives, their actions.
Hold them accountable.
And, that brings up an important point. We need to be willing to question our own biases, too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's easy to just accept information that confirms our existing beliefs.
Especially if it aligns with our political views.
Right. But critical thinking means being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Which can be uncomfortable.
It can, but it's essential for growth.
Definitely. Okay, so let's recap some of those practical tips for improving our critical thinking skills.
Yeah, good idea. The video emphasizes reflecting on our decision-making process.
Take a step back. Analyze why you make the choices you do.
Are you being impulsive? Or are you weighing the options carefully?
And what factors are influencing your decisions?
Emotions, biases, logic, evidence.
It's about understanding your own patterns.
So you can make more conscious choices in the future.
Right. And they also stress the importance of active listening.
Even when, or maybe especially when, you disagree with the other person.
Try to understand their point of view, even if you don't agree with it.
Ask clarifying questions. Really listen to their reasoning.
Don't just wait for your turn to speak.
It's about genuine engagement, not just trying to win an argument.
Exactly. And then there's the whole thing about questioning our own beliefs.
Right, those deep-seated beliefs that we often take for granted.
Why you believe what you believe.
What evidence supports it? Is there any evidence that contradicts it?
Be willing to change your mind when presented with new information.
That's a sign of intellectual humility.
It is, and it's a key part of being a critical thinker.
The video also encourages us to do things that challenge our brains, like puzzles or brain teasers.
Anything that makes you think outside the box?
They suggest reading books on the same topic from different authors.
To get a variety of perspectives.
Yeah, don't be afraid to engage in respectful debates with people who hold different views.
As long as it stays civil and focused on the issues.
Right. And remember, ask questions. Lots of questions.
Open-ended questions, the ones that can't be answered with a simple yes or no.
Those are the ones that really get the conversation flowing.
And make you think critically.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive on critical thinking, inspired by a Hindi YouTube video.
Who knew we could learn so much from such an unexpected source?
It just goes to show that valuable insights can come from anywhere.
And that critical thinking is a truly universal skill.
It's something we can all benefit from, no matter our background or language.
So let's all make a conscious effort to be more critical thinkers in our everyday lives.
Question everything, challenge assumptions, and never stop learning.
That's the key.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of critical exploration.
And until next time, keep those minds sharp.